So my name is Jesse Wieland. I'm the Associate Director at the Office of National Fellowships. And so today we're going to be talking briefly about the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship, all of those components, the different types of Gilman scholarships, the application components. But the main point of this presentation is to hear from our wonderful alumni who have all traveled to different countries, used their Gilman funding for different opportunities. And I think represent a good range of Nina, who's a current senior, Aria is a very recent graduate, and then Charles is getting close to being an old man like me. But I think we'll all be able to bring such a great perspective to how they've been able to use the Gilman Scholarship. But let's go ahead and jump right into the brief presentation that I have. So, here we go, technical difficulties. All right, so what is the Gilman Scholarship? So Gilman, when I'm typically referring to it, is going to be that first bullet point. So the Gilman Scholarship was founded back in 2000 by the U.S. Department of State, and it was funded specifically to help students from more limited financial means pursue international experiences. And so it's up to $5,000 for any student that's receiving a federal Pell Grant to apply towards a program of their choosing. And so that can be for a study abroad program, it can be for an internship, it can be for a research opportunity, or it can be for a cultural exchange program. And Gilman made a recent adaptation where they also allow for virtual programs, and they allow for programs of any duration. So whether this is a week-long program, for example, Florida State has its Beyond Borders opportunity. They have that week-long spring break opportunity coming up in Jamaica. They also have that opportunity in 3 weeks in Germany, and through international programs, Beyond Borders, Global Scholars, whatever program you may find, all of those could be eligible because they qualify for academic credit. And so you have a host of opportunities at Florida State that you can take advantage of. But we've also had students in the past that have found programs through other institutions. For example, there's a really great program at the University of Florida specifically for the study of Portuguese. We've had students that have done that. So if you find something that vibes with your interests, as long as it can count for credit, it's eligible for the Gilman Scholarship. Now that last bullet point, to be a qualified program, it needs to be a level 1 or 2 travel advisory, according to the Department of State. That's obviously it's a little different right now just because a lot of countries are level 3s and 4s because of the pandemic and for no other reason. So Gilman, a couple things there. They do have a few level 3 countries that they do allow students to apply to. But if your country that you're wanting to travel to is currently a level 3 or 4, that's okay. It's not going to preclude you or your application from being nominated. We just need to make sure that it goes down to a level 1 or 2. I believe it's about 5 weeks prior to your departure. And so there's still plenty of time if you're planning to travel abroad for this summer, even more time if you're planning for next fall or the following spring. Now, Gilman also has what is called their CNLA scholarship, which stands for Critical Need Language Award. And so in every way, shape, and form, it's the same as the Gilman Scholarship, except you can qualify for an additional $3,000 if you're studying one of the languages that's listed on this slide. So if you're interested in language study, and for all of these languages, you don't need to have any prior study or prior experience. You just need to know why this language is crucial to your academic future or your professional future. And so if you can make a case for that, it's just one additional short essay. But the payout is huge. An additional $3,000 is pretty significant. And Gilman also has recently added the Gilman Mccain Scholarship. Again, it's exactly the same as the Gilman Scholarship, that up to $5,000, but it's not specific to Pell Grant recipients. You just can demonstrate financial need, but you do need to be the dependent of an active duty military member. The only other thing that I should mention is that for the CNLA Gilman, if you apply and you don't receive it, you're still eligible to receive the base level Gilman scholarship, the one that's up to $5,000. I can just switch slides. So just to go over the application components very quickly, obviously, we need to complete the online application. And the reason I mention that is because that's something I'm happy to go through with you during a one-on-one meeting, because there are a lot of very specific questions that you may just not know the answer to immediately. And 9.9 times out of 10, it's going to be your study abroad or financial aid advisor. And so happy to bring that up in a meeting, but just want to make sure you don't wait until the very end to fill that out, because it does take time. So it's just kind of a deconstructed resume. So make sure that you're allocating time for that and not just waiting until the night before it's due. You can attach your unofficial transcript, so you don't have to pay the $10 or $15, whatever it is now, to get an official transcript. Unofficial is fine. But the main thing that the Office of National Fellowships will be working with you on are going to be your essay components. And so everyone applying is going to have to write the statement of grant purpose essay. And so that 7,000 characters equates to about a page and a half single spaced. And that's going to be exploring both your story, a little bit about your experience, either how you've come to the opportunity at hand or how you've come to your specific study and area of interest. And we're going to delve into the program, where you're going and why you're doing this opportunity, like the significance of this opportunity and where you hope it's going to take you. So that's the first essay. The second essay is going to be the building mutual understanding. The 3,000 characters is about half to 3/4 of a page. And that essay is looking for how you're going to serve as a citizen diplomat during your time abroad. So how are you going to engage with the place, the culture, the people? Maybe you have other skills and talents that you would like to use when, if you're a musician, or if you're a runner. Sometimes I've seen students use many creative examples on how they're going to engage with the town or the area. The next essay is thinking about when you come back, that follow-on service project. And so again, they give a lot of examples on the website, and this is completely up to you and how you would want to craft this. But I always tell students, if you can identify a organization or community or a group that you want to work with, tell me how you're going to work with them, and then tell me the impact of your engagement with that organization. Those are the three things that you need to do here. And so, for example, I've had plenty of students that have described the CARE organization and how they want to give a presentation or engage with their peers to share their experience and highlight what they've done abroad, whether through a GBM or a much smaller, more intimate presentation, whatever works for you. And the impact is they hope students develop more confidence to pursue these types of opportunities. Students have also talked about going back to their former high schools, working with community members in Tallahassee, or just some of their other involvement on campus. So whatever works best for you, use that. Make sure it's feasible above anything else. And the last essay is only if you're applying to one of the CNLA Gilman, that Critical Need Language Award. It's just an additional third of a page to just really emphasize the elements of your language study, perhaps where you've struggled, and how this program is going to supplement your learning, or maybe unique aspects that are, just really going to take you to that next level in your proficiency. And the last thing is there are no letters of recommendation for this application. And so we're coming up at about just 3 weeks prior to the deadline, but that's still plenty of time to go over these essays and to develop those to a place where we're both proud of them. And so speaking of that deadline, that is going to be May 1st. But the good thing about Gilman is that if you can plan ahead, you can apply to a program almost up to a full year in advance. And so this March deadline is for a program that would begin anywhere between May 1st of this year and April 30th of next year. So whether you're wanting to study abroad this summer, next fall, or next spring, if you can plan it, you can submit that proposal to Gilman. And even if that plan changes, but you're still nominated, we can submit a program change to update all of that information. And so the benefit of applying early, obviously, is that you can receive your funding months in advance of when you would actually go. But say if you were applying for a study abroad program that begins next spring, if you applied this semester, even if you don't get the Gilman scholarship, you can modify your application and reapply next fall. So applying early can give you multiple chances to receive that scholarship funding. If you're thinking of, say, if you're currently a freshman and you're wanting to, say, study the summer after your sophomore year, then the deadline would be next October. They haven't set the specific date, but it's usually going to be the beginning of the month. And again, that's going to be for after that October deadline, the next following year. So all the applications are going to be due at 11:59 Pacific time, so that's going to be 2:59 p.m. Our time. So I don't want you staying up until 3 a.m. getting this application submitted. So that's why we really recommend getting started early and working with us. And so once your application is good to go, we'll go ahead and get that submitted. And so just to talk about what are some things that you can do now is for even if you don't know exactly where you would like to go, that's absolutely fine. There's still plenty of time. I know of a lot of resources, so I'm happy to talk to you about where you can start looking, but start thinking about either the type of experience you want to prioritize, whether that's an internship or study program or research or whatever it may be. Or some students know exactly where they would like to go. For whatever your reasons may be, maybe that can really help you narrow your search and find the best opportunity. And so we want to really make sure that whatever it is you're participating in some way is significant to either your current studies or what you would like to do. And let's find ways to flesh that out in your essay. And of course, contact our office, and I have our contact information that you could write down on one of the next slides just to set up an appointment. And these last couple of things before I turn it over to the panel is, of course, if you don't have your passport, just remember that there is a long waiting time for that, but you can do it through international programs here at FSU, but it usually takes about 3 months. And so you want to go ahead, get started on that early, not just for a Gilman scholarship. I think having your passport, there's just a lot of benefits to having it, opens a lot of doors. And so just think about that. And then there is paperwork, which is, this is not the fun part of the presentation, but you do need to submit the appropriate forms for any program through Florida State. And so I, again, can walk you through that process just to make sure you're registering your trip, making sure that you have travel insurance and all of that good stuff. So this is our contact information. Again, my name is Jesse. And so feel free to reach out if you would like to set up an appointment. I also saw that Bonnie just joined the presentation as well. And so she would be more than happy to meet with you too. And then we have Christine, our graduate assistant. So thank you so much for listening to me ramble about the Gilman Scholarship for just a hot minute. And so now would love to turn it over to our panel and get them in on the conversation. And so how don't we start with just briefly introducing yourselves, name, major, hometown, what you're studying, or just what you're currently doing.
I'll let the ladies go first.
Always the gentleman.
All right, I'll go ahead. Hi, everyone. My name is Nina Perdomo. My pronouns are she, her. I was born in Peru, but I grew up in Miami, Florida. And I double major in classical archaeology and Italian, and I minor in anthropology and English.
Hello, everybody. I was struggling to find the unmute button. My name is Ari Halden. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I was a Florida State University anthropology major, graduated in May 2020 with a bachelor's of science. I was like losing my train of thought there. You can tell that 5:30 is like my prime time. And I did my Gilman experience in 2019, and I went to Vietnam for 4 months.
And hello, everybody. My name is Charles. Like Jesse said, I'm getting to be an old one at this point, but my pronouns are he and his. I'm originally from Tampa, Florida. I'm currently in Miami, Florida. So it's kind of a, being around all these, hurricanes, it's interesting. But I graduated from FSU in 2018 with a Bachelor of Science in Biological Sciences and Psychology. And then I went on immediately afterwards in 2018 to get a Master's of Public Health in Epidemiology and Global Communicable Diseases from the University of South Florida, back home. And it has been extremely useful, to say the least. These last couple of years, I actually work for the Florida Department of Health in Miami-Dade County here in Miami. And I work with the charter schools program, so investigating different diseases and conditions and illnesses, including, but also, excluding COVID, a number of things. And some of my hobbies, when I'm not losing my mind with COVID, I try to cook, fish, travel when we're not in a pandemic, and I enjoy eating good food, so I'm a foodie.
Awesome, thanks, y'all. So let's just dig right into it. Can you talk a little bit about what you used your Gilman funding for, and just kind of the nature of your experience abroad? And Nina, since you started, we could just start with you again.
Yeah, so I got the Gilman scholarship the year of 2020 when everything kind of went down the drain. So it was a really interesting experience. Gilman did give us some time to use the scholarship funding and everything like that, since nobody really knew what was happening. It was supposed to be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and then it ended up, we're still kind of in this. So I looked for a virtual internship and I actually got one. I got a tutoring position with the Collegio Ghislieri, which is an Italian university in Pavia, Italy. And I tutored Italian students with English and helped them with English work. And then I also was able to use my Gilman application, like my experience applying and everything like that, to later go to Florence, Italy. And I did internship work curating a museum exhibit, and I did a lot of curatorial museum work there.
Yes, but we're going the order that we went. Also, I realized I missed a huge chunk of my introduction. I am from Pembroke Pines, Florida, so just north of Miami, just south of Fort Lauderdale. I'm currently actually in Concord, New Hampshire, just north of Boston, so not in the state of Florida at the moment. I am an AmeriCorps member, AmeriCorps Vista leader, and it's more of like a leadership role, an education nonprofit I work at. For my Gilman experience, I utilized that for the Global Scholars Program at Florida State. And I know it looks a little different now due to the pandemic, but I went the summer before 2020, so in 2019. And I was there teaching English and conducting research on ethnic minority single mothers and their experiences in Vietnam. I was working with a nonprofit called Coins for Change, which is basically founded by a single mother for single mothers and other marginalized women across the country of Vietnam, and just essentially learning more about their experiences in the country. So that was what I utilized Gilman for. And I knew about it for years, but I didn't apply to my junior year. So, I mean, if there are some people that are freshmen or sophomores now, definitely keep this information with you. You never know when you'll be inspired to go somewhere, and this can definitely help with that.
And like Aria, I also I used my Gilman scholarship money for the Global Scholars Program at FSU. Working with Jesse at the time prior to actually applying for Global Scholars, I was trying to get an idea of what I wanted to do the summer before my last year at FSU. So, I had heard some things about Global Scholars and, people that were in the CARE program getting this Gilman scholarship, and it was like a lot of money. A couple people, they won that I knew won the full amount of $5,000. And I was like, you know what, I'm a first generation college student. Like, I don't know if I'll ever get the chance to do this. So I gave it a shot. My cohort was the year of 2017. So it was the summer of 2017. I think I went to see Jesse in ONF, I would say the fall semester before that summer. And it was just a like relaxed conversation with Jesse. He's super easy guy to, speak to. But I was just like, hey, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I'd like to do. Is this something you think we could do? And he was like, absolutely. So, we started the writing process, as Jesse mentioned, just going through all of the, different application stuff. And, when I ended up getting the scholarship, I got the full amount and I was like, oh my God, this actually happened. Like, I didn't think it was going to happen. I was able to use the money for, the NGO that I went to. So I went to Ghana in West Africa. I went to the Humanity and Community Development Projects in Ghana. And the money was super helpful for booking my flight to and from, the program fees, because for 9 weeks, I'm sorry, it was kind of expensive. And it also helped with a lot of the, pre-travel stuff that I didn't realize at the time, but it's super helpful to prepare for all that stuff beforehand. So like any medications and, vaccinations I needed before the travel, submitting passport related documents, visas, all the funds that may be associated with that. And then whatever was left, all the, cool souvenirs and fun things that I wanted to get when I was there and bring back with me. And the nature of my time abroad, I would say it was super insightful for a lot of reasons, but I know we're going to cover that a little bit later. So I'll go back to Jesse with that one.
Yeah, before we dig into some of the specifics of what you were able to do, can you talk a little bit about what was just challenging, either about the application process itself or anything else that you might have been balancing while you were applying to the Gilman Scholarship, or what did you have to kind of get through to submit your application?
For me, my answer, I feel like, is a little bit obvious. Of course, COVID kind of was really scary. We didn't really know what was happening. And of course, I was applying to a program in Italy. I was originally going to do an excavation, an archaeological excavation, but because I remember it hit Italy first really hard. And so it was just kind of like, I was waiting, and it just didn't really get better until, eventually now it kind of is. But so yeah, COVID was definitely the biggest, scariest thing, but the Gilman Scholarship had a very good response. Everyone was kind of freaking out, but they were really good, very responsive to emails, to phone calls. I was calling them all the time, and they were really, really responsive and helpful. Another thing in general is the writing process. I was kind of just insecure in general about my writing, but I went to see Jesse. And after meeting with him and everything, I felt so much more confident, and I ended up getting the funding. I also was really shocked. I remember I cried. I was like, oh my God, no way, I got this. So I definitely recommend, don't get so shy about your own writing. Be confident, and talking to Jesse definitely helped me out. So I recommend seeing him or anyone in the office.
I think for me, a challenging part of the application was, one, figuring out what country I would like to go to. I know that I actually talked to Jesse about this process, and we kind of talked about a few ideas of places that we can, Jesse can go. Places that I can go that we can collaborate on for the application. So I think that was something that was difficult at first, because I wasn't sure if I wanted an entirely new part of the world. I've been to Southeast Asia in the past, specifically Thailand, but it was a brief 2-week experience, and I didn't feel like I got as much out of it as I could have. So I thought, well, I could go back to this area of the world again, try a different country and see if it's something I'd be interested in doing, or go somewhere else entirely new and experience that. But also, while I was going through that process, I was also applying for the Global Scholars Program, and I wasn't sure if I was going to get that or Gilman. So kind of going to both of these with the hope that I would get both, but there was no guarantee that I would. And if I didn't, what would be that backup plan, essentially? So I think that was a challenge for me in the application. Also kind of echoing what Nina said, my writing, because I think that this was the first ever national scholarship I've applied to. So you are definitely working with a pool of people from across the country with different lived experiences, different educational backgrounds. And sometimes it can feel a little nerve-wracking to think, wow, am I good enough to be considered for this specific award? Will I have what they want, quote unquote? So I think that was something that definitely was in the back of my mind throughout the process. But I think having the guidance of Jesse, going to different meetings, I think I went to like a Gilman writing workshop where I was sat down with an alumni or someone that I would receive the award in the past, and like they kind of helped me a little bit with getting my thoughts down, learning about it just online through as many resources as I could, like their blog, just kind of getting more information about it made me feel more confident in making an application that eventually did get me the Gilman scholarship to go to Vietnam. So I think that was a helpful thing to do, is kind of learn more about it as I was applying.
Yeah, and to echo both of their points, I think, you know, it was important to, for me at least, when I was applying, like Arya mentioned, I wasn't in Global Scholars yet, so I had to go through the process of applying to that. Once I found out about that, then I was able to make the decision, okay, you know, this is actually happening. I need to figure out how I'm going to fund this whole thing. That's when I really, you know, reached out to Jesse, and I was like, hey, you know, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this without this funding. How can we move forward? And also, as Arya mentioned, this was the first time for me as well that I had ever ventured into writing in the style of a major scholarship, a grant. You know, in undergrad, whether you passed, you know, your English classes, or you didn't, or if you're still taking them, you know, there's a certain way to write academically versus writing for the purposes of applying for a big award. So it's very different. In the whole process of writing, I, of course, viewed myself as not the greatest writer, but I think all of the meetings that I had with Jesse, he really, you know, was great about instilling that level of self-confidence and saying, okay, these are the things that you have mentioned are your you know, what you identify with and your background and your passions. And I think all of these things would really be great to go in this direction. As an African-American male, you know, first generation, pre-health, HCDP Ghana was great because they had a service learning international like pre-medical program. So just being able to talk about, you know, my experiences growing up in the States, and, you know, at what point I would like to at some, you know, point in the future become a health professional, and all of those things culminated into a perfect, I wouldn't say perfect, but it was great for the actual application, a way to just talk about my story and really show who I was in that application and why I thought I should be selected. It's super important to, you know, obviously talk about yourself and what you plan to do with it, and especially afterwards. So those are some of the challenges I thought I faced. Planning, like I said, that was something that I did ahead of time. And then, yeah, definitely what I wanted to do once I was there and afterwards, everything was in steps. So, you know, I had the idea beforehand when writing my Gilman that my post-trip experience was to give a presentation about Gilman and continue paying it forward with previous, you know, future presentations. So I'm part of, or was I am an alum of the Scholarship Foundation, Southern Scholarship Foundation, and I was able to give a presentation about Gilman afterwards to that community. And I know that it helped some of them, you know, get the idea of like, okay, even though we may come from certain socioeconomic backgrounds, it is possible to do. So yeah, that was my struggles, but triumphs.
Yeah, Charles, I don't know if you remember, but I was still a graduate assistant when we worked on your application. So it was a huge learning opportunity for both of us. But I do think it's important to reiterate that when you applied, it was all just like, in a best case scenario, this is what I hope to be doing. And if that's all you have, that's all you need. And so, you know, if plans change, we can always revisit that. But the next question I have for y'all is, if this was your first time traveling abroad, can you talk a little bit about what was really challenging about that transition, or maybe what stood out the most? If it wasn't your first time abroad, what was different about your Gilman experience relative to your last time abroad?
Yeah, just a side note, it's really nice to hear all the other panelists' experiences, because it's really easy to get caught up in your head when you're applying and being like, oh, I'm a first generation immigrant, a person of color, low socioeconomic status. Like, why would I get this scholarship? So it's really nice hearing that. I hope anyone else listening can get something out of that too. I wish somebody would have told me that while I was applying. But regarding my travel abroad, I was born in Peru, but I left really young and I haven't been back. So I wouldn't consider that my first time abroad, I guess. So going to Florence, Italy was my first time abroad. I was very nervous, but excited. I've been studying the Italian culture and language for like 7 years, I think now. So I would consider myself pretty fluent. I had never been to Italy though, my first and only time in Europe and Italy. So I was really excited to use the language for the first time. And I'm really glad, looking back now, that I did speak it pretty fluently, because people were so much nicer to me because I could speak the language. Just everything flowed so much better. If I needed help or something, people would just generally so much nicer to me because I spoke the language. So I was just happy to put myself to the test, and I was happy to see that I did pretty okay.
Is it me or Aria? I can't remember.
Whomever.
Oh, okay, I'll go. So, all right, question about first time traveling. Yeah, that was the first time I had ever been outside of the United States. And I think the best way that I can describe what it was like for me traveling outside the US was, and I've told this story a number of times. So when you're trying to get an international trip to Africa on a budget, you're going to have long flight times and there's going to be layovers. One of them was in Brussels, Belgium. And I did not understand the concept of a connecting flight. So when I got to Brussels, I thought, okay, I need to go pick up my bags, because that's what I had seen in a number of movies. You get off flights, you go get your bags. So baggage claim comes, didn't see my bag, started freaking out. I went up to the checkout lady, and I actually ended up exiting the airport, going, out and where bags would be claimed. And I remember going to the lady and asking, I was like, yeah, my bag never came. Is there any way that I can track this? I'm supposed to be, traveling. And she was like, may I see your ticket? She picked up the ticket and she was like, yeah, you actually have a connecting flight. So they've already, your checked bag has been moved to that next flight. And I was like, wow, what a wake up experience. Cause I was like, I had no idea what that even meant. And I was like, oh, great. And then I realized, oh no, I need to go back into the airport. So I have to go through security again. So I had a very short window of time. I almost didn't make the flight to Ghana. So needless to say, I had some people looking out for me. Once I finally got there, fortunately, a lot of people there spoke English. So, I did have someone waiting for me, at least with our program. When I got there, I didn't realize how hot it was actually going to be. They'd always talked about, the African heat in the middle of the summer, which apparently that actually was, the rainy season. So it wasn't as hot as it could have been. So that was definitely something that I took it all in. I also remember, I know it's been a little while at this point, but, because it was the first time, I'm used to taking buses or, somewhere quickly. And when you're traveling with roads that aren't, in the big city where the airport was, the roads are paved pretty well, but once you get into some of those further cities, you start to see that, okay, not all the roads are even. This is a lot longer trip than I thought it was. And what would maybe take about an hour or two ended up taking 4 hours for me to actually get to the host site. But the entire time, I remember telling myself beforehand, and when I got there, I'm going to go on this trip with a completely open mind. Any negative experiences that I'm going to have, you know, it's not going to faze me. I'm just going to go, whatever happens, happens. And it's going to be great regardless. That was the mindset that I had. And I think having that mindset ahead of time, any things that may have been minor or even, you know, slightly major inconveniences, they really weren't, because it was a once in a lifetime opportunity that I thought I'd never have. And I was going to take all of those experiences in, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The one and only bad experience that I did have was, I'm pretty sure I got food poisoning from one thing that I ate. It lasted for about 12 hours, but afterwards I was right as rain. So.
For my experience, it wasn't my first experience abroad. My family is from Jamaica, and I did spend a little bit of time growing up as a child in Jamaica, although I hardly remember that part of my life. But when I went to Thailand, it was about almost 2 years prior to that experience. And I think that was my first official time abroad, especially on my own. I went on my own. I flew there on my own. I flew back on my own. I loved it. I thought it was great. Thankfully, nothing really bad happened. I'm very, when it comes to flying, I love flying. So like I was very excited to have those like long, like 15, 14-hour flights connecting. Oh, another 6-7 hour flight. It was a very exciting time. But I think when I went to Vietnam, the challenges I faced were very similar to Thailand, but being there for so long, I think a lot of things became more prevalent. Like, for example, I am a Black woman. That was something that shocked a lot of people, and including my students. I think that there are some people that had reactions that range from curiosity and intrigue to like fear and disgust just by looking at me. And I think that was something that, although I've experienced very briefly in Thailand, was something I was not prepared to experience for several months on end in an area that was really rural and very agriculturally based. Like I was in a very rural area where there, like the idea of Hanoi, which is the capital city of Vietnam, being about 3 hours south, like there's a lot of room for basically anything to happen, in the sense that there is no tourist industry. So people's reactions to me can range so widely versus the city where people are used to seeing people from other countries. So I think that was a challenging experience in and of itself, was having just no idea how people would react to my presence, whether or not I want to go out to certain places because of that. The constant pictures, I'm not a picture person, the constant people like want to touch my hair or my skin or asking interesting questions. I think those were challenges that I anticipated, but I think as time went on, it was something I eventually did get used to, as interesting as that sounds. And I don't want that to be a deterrent for someone who's considering a country that may not have a large Black population or a large population of an identity that's similar to your own. There was a lot of growth that I found in myself, and a lot of growth that I found in what it means to be Black in another country, especially Black in an Asian country. And I think that there was a lot of communication that went on, and even my presence just being there really made people feel like, okay, this is a group of people that clearly exists and clearly have feelings and boundaries and other things that human beings do. And I think it really humanized my teaching, and it humanized me as a person to be in certain spaces where people like me or people from my background aren't commonly presented or aren't commonly living. So I think that was an important part. I think another challenge was this kind of like keeping up with certain things for Gilman. So like when you arrive in your country, you have at least, I think, 72 hours or less to let them know that you have arrived, you're safe and sound. And I think for me, I was in such a rural area, like Gilman thought I was in Hanoi. I don't know how they thought that, but they thought I was in Hanoi. So like they connected me with someone who was a part of the Department of State in another program. I think he was I think a Wrangle fellow, which maybe some of you have heard of that, maybe not. But essentially they connected me with him, and he's like, oh, we should meet up sometime, grab a coffee or a tea. And I'm just like, I'm like 3 hours away from you, sir. I would love to, but like the streets are flooding. There's like a tropical storm coming. We'll reschedule. And I think that was something that I really appreciated Gilman doing, like adding in like that additional piece of connection outside of my community was helpful, but also me not being in Hanoi didn't really help that too much. So I would say the reason why they thought I was in Hanoi is because like the option for my province wasn't even there until like way into my process. So I think just kind of keeping that in mind and acknowledging that Gilman will check in on you, which is great, but also make sure you're close to where they think you are, which is that's not great advice now that I'm saying it out loud, but it's advice nonetheless.
Yeah, Gilman has definitely updated their policies and their drop-down menu options in the last couple of years. Yeah, for sure. But I really appreciate that answer because I think it kind of segues perfectly into the next one that I wanted to ask, which was about just any identities that became more or less salient during your time abroad. Or how did you manage that isolation, or did you at any time feel lonely, or how did you start to like kind of build that community? I know it's a loaded question, so feel free to take it in strides or however you would like to.
Well, for me, like I mentioned before, I am really glad that I had knowledge of the Italian language and culture. I am a woman, and traveling, it can be scary for women in general. People do take advantage, especially in places like anywhere, basically. So I'm glad I kind of had some of that knowledge. People would just kind of leave me alone the minute I sounded or could kind of fit in. So I was lucky in that regard. I also went to Florence last summer. So it was just basically local Italians there. There weren't people abroad yet because the borders are pretty much closed, except for people working, or we had this special permit to go. So it was just traveling was this whole thing. I had to travel with this packet. People at the airport even were like, oh, you can come. And I was like, yes, I can. I had to show them my paperwork. But yeah, because of that, it was just local Italians there. So you kind of stand out a little more when it's clear that you're not from there. So it was just extra, stay on your toes, be extra careful. So I'm glad I had that. But in general, going, you do learn, there's always things to learn. You can only learn so much out of a textbook. There's nuances and things that you don't really get until you're there, wherever that may be. So that's just something that I learned. And community wise, I did get a little homesick. I wasn't gone for very long. It was only 6 weeks, but still, being Hispanic culture is very home based, very about family and things like, and food. And there's not really a lot of diversity. You can only eat so much pasta in Italy before you're just like, all right, I'm tired of it. It's good stuff though. And also being on a budget in Florence is a little difficult. So it was just like, okay, cheapest pasta on the menu and I'm good to go for the day, But when I did feel a little homesick, I happened to find one Venezuelan place nearby from where I was staying, and they had like arepas and some Venezuelan food. So every now and then I would just go over there. So that was just how I kind of dealt with some mild homesickness. And because of my language knowledge, I did manage to, make connections and friendships over there like that. But sometimes, you just need some food from back home to make you feel alive again.
I would say that it's hard to say in trying to reflect and remember on it at this point, because it has been almost 4 to 5 years. One of the big things that I remember was, I think, speaking to Aria's point, but on the opposite side. So, as someone that identifies as a person of color, being mixed, I'm African American and white, I went with some individuals of my cohort as well. So it wasn't just me. I went with 2 other people from my same year that went to the program. But they're also both people of color, and they're darker skinned than I am. And they actually, I wouldn't say blended in, but they were similar skin tone to the Ghanaians. And I was actually a lot lighter than a lot of the people there. And I remember some of them at the time when I first got there. When I got there, I looked just like this, and I didn't cut my hair at all. I actually let my beard grow a lot longer throughout the entire summer. So I kind of, was looking a little wild. But I remember like going around in the community that I was in, they would call me this name, and I'll never forget. It was Yevu, and it basically meant white man. Because I'm actually, even though I'm mixed, I'm still lighter skinned than they were. And just having people constantly stare at you, and, you know, realize and recognize that, you know, you're different. There's a reason that you're different. They can't really figure out why. I would say that was one of the main things that stood out to me. But like I said, because of the mindset that I had going into it, I didn't let it affect me as much, just because I knew, you know, it's even in the US, when something stands out, people do the same thing here. You know, they may stare at you, they may, you know, say something about you. But I think who you are and, you know, the level of confidence that you have, and not so much confidence, but, you know, just how you set yourself apart from people. People are going to say things about you your entire life. So at some point, it's just going to have to roll off. Sometimes, you know, there were plenty of times I walked up to those people and I introduced myself, and it kind of just brought that whole like, oh, okay, you know, you're not an alien. You're just, you know, another person that looks a little bit different than me. So, you know, that part of my experience, I think was the thing that stood out the most, and was a huge, you know, culture shock. I didn't really feel homesick as much, like I said, because the loneliness wasn't as there, because I was fortunate to have two other people from FSU, you know, same aspiration, same goal, same cohort as me. So we were able to bounce off a lot of experiences, and, you know, laugh about things, and, you know, question why, you know, certain things happened. Or just things that, you know, we might have thought were awkward, but culturally it was just accepted. When I was the first person that got to Ghana, when I got there, and I was there by myself for about 3 days. But even during that time, I think because of the just adrenaline that I had of getting there, being excited to be there, and the fact that I was so overwhelmed by the heat, I didn't do anything but like eat, sleep, and read, and, you know, sleep some more those first couple of days. So that time where I was like alone per se, it went by because my cohort members were there, you know, almost immediately. So
I think adding to some of the challenges I had when I was there, first I mentioned my race and I mentioned my gender, and I was actually, similarly to what Charles said, I was actually with another global scholar member when we arrived in Vietnam. So I wasn't too alone, and that was a nice thing to have someone I can talk to about, vent some frustrations. Although this person was not a person of color, they were a white American. And I think that sometimes kind of having that very distinct physical appearance difference between us kind of confused some people. I think some people wondered why we were even talking to each other. I think some people didn't even realize that we were people that knew each other. Like, we would talk to each other, but even when we were staying in a line, for example, they would skip me and like kind of go in between us. And I think there were many reasons why that happened, but I think that it was a very interesting thing to see how I was treated versus this person, since they kind of represented more of like the stereotypical, like average American look, like the blonde hair, the blue eyes, the light skin. And I think me looking so different from that individual really made it interesting to see how people reacted to not only us separately, but then when we would like walk together, for example, or do something together. So I think that was a very interesting thing to notice and recognize. And I also think, with me being Black, I think there were some worries about certain products that were in Vietnam. So Vietnam and a lot of countries around the world, so this is not just a Vietnamese thing, there's a lot of products that are advertised to lighten or whiten skin. And I think that was a real concern I had, especially toward the end when I was running out of my body wash. And I was not able to go to the capital where there are typically more options. And I went to a local market and I had to ask the person there, who was one of the students at the school that we taught at. I asked her, does this have any skin whitening product in it? And she was like, oh, like, do you want it? I'm like, no, I don't want any of it. I'm asking, like, is it there? Can I use this? And like, it's definitely something that I think if you're a darker skinned person in general, regardless if you're Black or Asian or Latinx or any other group, I think that is something that you would have to be aware of when you're going to different countries, especially countries that have a predominantly dark skinned population, is like some of those products may not be what you want to be putting on your skin for health reasons, personal reasons, cultural reasons. I think that was another challenge that I also had to consider, because like, it was in everything, the deodorant, the shampoo, the lotion, the body wash, it was all over the place. So I think that was another challenge. I think also additionally, the challenge of working within the school itself, it was me, the other American, and then there were two Filipina teachers who were English teachers back in the Philippines. And it was interesting when we would all go out together because people would assume that the Filipina teachers were Vietnamese and start speaking Vietnamese to them, but they don't know Vietnamese. People, of course, knew that we were visibly not Vietnamese, so they wouldn't speak to us. And I think that also kind of translated sometimes in the classroom, where there would be times where people felt more comfortable, for example, having their kids in the other Americans class versus my class, basically on the sole assumption that they thought I wouldn't be a great English teacher based on how I look, probably perceiving me to not be either a native English speaker, maybe I'm not a native English speaker, or that I don't speak the language well because of my outward appearance. So I think that was another interesting challenge to navigate, was trying to show that I had teaching experience, I can teach this language, I know it well enough to do so. And I think that how I kind of overcame those things, because like I know that I'm saying all this now and it sounds challenging. It's like, oh my gosh, that's all awful. Why did you go? But like I think my experience there really showed me not only how much value I should have for myself, but also just how much I can contribute to a community, even if the initial thought of me being there might be negative. Because at the end of the experience, it was not the same as when I was there in the beginning. I think I definitely felt more comfortable around the community and vice versa for me. And I think that was something that if I didn't go so out of my comfort zone, I maybe wouldn't have experienced in another part of the world, given the unique culture I was in. And I think another aspect too was the fact that I think that there was a genuine interest after people kind of subsided their initial reactions to truly understand why I was there, because I wasn't in a tourist area. So oftentimes people wonder, why are you in this part of Vietnam? There is no tourist area. And I think it made people more curious about why a foreigner would come into this specific community. And I think that maybe some people really enjoyed hearing that answer. Some people maybe thought nothing of it, but I think that was another conversation that really helped me reflect on my intentions, especially if I go abroad again, and what that might look like, and the importance of understanding my perspective and what I can bring forth given my identities.
So I have one more question, but I'm happy to hold that. Just knowing that we're running a little low on time, I want to make sure that the students that we have in attendance with us today have time to ask any questions that you might have. And then I can always ask my question later for the recording purposes to make sure that it's there. So if you have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself if you would like, but we'd love to hear from you. Camilla, thanks for that. And so Camilla's asking, what was like just the currency exchange like? And just, can you talk a little bit about that process?
I can speak to that a bit. For the Vietnamese dong, which is the currency in Vietnam, at the time, it was $1 was equal to 23,000 Vietnamese dong. And for example, to kind of give you a frame of reference, how much 23,000 Vietnamese dong is, one water bottle, like a regular size water bottle, will typically cost around 8 to 10,000 Vietnamese dong. So I think it was a very interesting exchange rate because it was expensive to get to Vietnam, but once I was there, the Gilman scholarship and other funding I had actually stretched very far. And I was fortunate to live with a host family, so they were able to help with certain transactions, especially early on. But sometimes the Vietnamese currency, at least for me, was a little confusing because it all has the same person's face on it, just different colors and like sometimes a different size. So I think kind of making sure I was really careful about what I was actually giving out to people was very important. But overall, it was very beneficial to have such a large exchange rate going so far away from the States.
And while this wasn't quite your question, Camilla, when Gilman does their, whenever they select their recipients, they will do a direct deposit of the funding into your bank account. But yeah. as much as it would be fun for them to just give you like, cash, which I understand why that's not pragmatic, but would still be fun.
Yeah, for at least for my experience, I remember taking some cash with me, and I had already communicated with Latika and those running Global Scholars what the best way to go about doing the exchange was, because of the fees that can be associated, or if you order it through your bank, sometimes they can it can cost a little bit more, or it can cost more in your specific the country that you're going to. But I remember I took some cash with me over there, and my host was able to, help me find a place, that was able to exchange my money for the CD. It's a Ghanaian CD. I actually have a couple here, so I don't know if you can see it, but that's a five CDs, and for every $1 at the time, it was 4 CDs. So I don't exactly know. Like I said, most of the food and everything was provided. There were some shops where I could buy some things, but it wasn't very expensive. I could get probably like a meal for less than 10 CD. So it was pretty cheap.
And also most airports, if you think ahead, you can either use cash or I think you can still use a credit card. I don't know how that works, but if you bring cash ahead of time at the airport, you can exchange it in the airport for the currency of the country that you're going to. But we also have Ryan. Do you have a question?
Yes. So thank you all for like sharing your experiences. But my question is like regarding the follow-on service project. Do you guys, I know like Nina talked about teaching a student English within Italy. Did you guys feel as though it was like hard to keep up with your studies and continue like with the follow-on service project in those countries? And like what else, other projects did you guys work on? Because all I remember is Nina's.
Yeah, for mine, I was able to do a few things for my follow-on service project. I spoke at a CARE General Assembly. I'm also a CARE student. So I spoke at a CARE General Assembly about my experience with other Gilman alumni at the time who recently came back from their summer experience via the Gilman scholarship. I also had done something with Going Global, which was something that was done at the Globe, where I presented on my experience teaching and living in Vietnam. And basically it was a poster presentation where I kind of just had people walk around, ask questions. Lastly, I was also an idea grant recipient when I was on my Gilman scholarship, and the president showcase that typically happens in October was something I also prepared for when I came back based on the research I did there. So there were a few different ways of outreach I did. Thankfully, it didn't really conflict too much with some of the things I had to do for school since I was in my senior year and I was kind of already winding down academically. But I think that also the Global Scholars Program provides you space to kind of cultivate your project, because there's also a Global Scholars Showcase in December that kind of ends off your Global Scholars year. And I think that opportunity helped me kind of gather my thoughts and get things together for additional presentations I had.
Yeah, I would agree with Aria in that the fact that Global Scholars, when you do the program, it's not just the summer. I don't know if it's still the same, but we had a spring course before the summer, and we also had, a follow-on course in the fall that we had to do a cumulative capstone, where we pretty much gave a presentation about what our experience was, all the different things that we've discussed in this session, what we've learned from it, what we hope to do with it, and our experience in general. So utilizing that as a basis for the follow-up presentation that I did for Gilman, again, to spread the word about Gilman to the community I chose, which was the Southern Scholarship Foundation. Me and a couple of other CARE and Global Scholars students that had the experience, we were able to, and that got Gilman, we were able to talk about all of these things again. And at that point, really, it was just the scheduling, finding the time that worked for all of us, and just putting together the presentation. Things may be a little bit different now with the requirements, but I wouldn't say that it was something that I was burdened with in the fall semester of my senior year. It was pretty easy to do compared to like applying to Gilman, Global Scholars, and the whole experience.
Yeah, just to add, I think Gilman does give you 6 months, I believe, to after you come back to do your whole follow-on service project. So you do have plenty of time. I'm still like working on all of that now. So this is part of my follow-on service project. And if you're not in Global Scholars, because I was not part of that, you can just reach out to any of your other, if you're in any clubs or anything. I'm part of Italian Honor Society. So I've been doing work with them and telling them about the Gilman Scholarship, Classics Honor Society. So anything like that, if you are in any clubs or honor societies, or reach out to the FSU Care Program, which I'm working with, to do a presentation. So there's a lot of things that you can kind of do to work on your project. And I don't think it's as time consuming, like Charles said, as the application process. So it's definitely like, it's okay.
And I always offer to students, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help or help facilitate. And so that's exactly what Nina did, was just, hey, as I'm working on my project, if you have anything going on or you'd like me to meet, or share my, and so clearly, yes, because, Nina's fantastic. And the added layer of the challenges that you had to face, like with the pandemic and travel, I think that's a really important perspective for students to hear as well. And so ONF is happy to help in any ways that we can. Other questions?
I also want to take this free space to add very quickly. I'm a Gilman Alumni Ambassador, and what that is I'm an individual that helps you through everything from the application to once you officially go abroad, yay, you did it, and then when you come back, yay, you're back. So I help with the entire process. So if you ever need any help for someone either looking over applications, someone to kind of jot down ideas with, other than Jesse or other than maybe other people that you may currently already speak to, I am here and I'm available, and I'll drop my email in the chat.
That's perfect, Aria. And I think that also emphasizes the community that Gilman likes to facilitate even after the experience, to make it a long-lasting experience. The last question that I had was just talking about, and so for Nina, how has your Gilman experience kind of shaped the tail end of your college experience? And then for Charles and Aria, how did your Gilman experience influence what you pursued after your time at FSU?
So for me, I had never really done museum work before. I knew it was something I was always kind of interested in. And I know Aria has some experience with this, being in the world of anthropology, but the anthropology archaeology world is very, especially classical studies, is very white, male dominated. I am a Hispanic immigrant, so I feel like I could, give a new perspective to this world of study. But I always knew museum studies, which is pretty correlated to archaeology work, was something I wanted to do. So I got this experience and I love doing it so much that I am now, well, I just finished applying to graduate school for museum studies. I actually got an email this week. I got into my first graduate program, so I'm very excited. Thank you guys. But yeah, I would have never been able to afford going or to have this experience otherwise, to have the application experience to use for other scholarships and things like that otherwise, without the Benjamin Gilman Scholarship. So I don't even think I'd be doing graduate school for museum studies today if it wasn't for this experience. I know I haven't talked a lot about my tutoring work because it wasn't an abroad experience, so it doesn't answer a lot of the questions. But I did have my tutoring experience, even though it was virtual, and it was really great. I got to learn a lot about, regular college life abroad and relate to my students in that way. And that was really interesting. And I actually loved that so much too, that now I'm applying for teaching assistantships and everything like that. I really liked the teaching English, the tutoring, the language exchange. So that's, the Gilman Scholarship has really shaped me in that way. And then having all of these new experiences coming back, I have had a million other internship opportunities. I got to intern with the Library of Congress. And now hopefully this summer, I'm going to go do archaeology work in Italy, COVID allowing, so we'll see. But the Gilman Scholarship really made me feel confident enough to, go out and pursue all these other opportunities. So I'm really glad that I got it and applied.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's congratulations, by the way. That's fantastic. One of the things that I did during my experience was and Jesse and I had floated this idea for a little while, but I was like, you know what, I want to do more. I, grew from this experience. That was awesome. And Jesse was like, this, don't stop there. Definitely, you should check out this thing called Fulbright. And I was like, what? Like, what is that? Do we even have time? Do I have time to do that? And I didn't really have a complete idea of what I wanted to do after I graduated. But I knew that my experiences in Ghana and doing this, medical service learning trip and, learning about health disparities and, the inequities between individuals that are in the rural areas of Ghana all the way to the capital. It brought up all of these things that I didn't know at the time, but really it ended up being an interest in public health. And I started to get an idea of, what the purposes of having a master's of public health would be and how I could use it in a number of different ways. And when Jesse mentioned Fulbright, they have a couple different types of awards, but the one that I was going to apply for, or that I did apply for, was the Open Study and Research Award. And my goal was to do, with that award, a Master's of Public Health at the University of Sheffield in Sheffield, England. And I applied, did the whole thing, went up, got to the semifinalist, spot. And then, unfortunately, I didn't get it. But I learned a lot from that experience because it helped me grow even more as a writer, and just realizing that I could even get to that point. I felt proud that, it was something that I thought I could pursue. And it actually helped me with my grad school applications for other programs. So I still ended up going to get my master's. Jesse and I were still a little sore about what happened with Sheffield. But one of the things that I would say is that if you do this experience and then you do choose to do Fulbright, one piece of advice that I would have is it might be helpful for whatever program or wherever it is that you're going to see if the person that is at that program, what they're doing. Because a lot of the similarities that I had in my application, it was actually that the person that was already currently there was doing something very similar. So I think that was one of the limitations that I had and may have prevented me from getting it. Maybe if I did a different university in another part of, Europe, things could have been different. But hindsight's 2020. It was still a great experience, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But one last piece of advice that I would give is go see Jesse sooner. Go have those conversations with him and Bonnie, because I worked with Bonnie before she was with ONF. She was my bio advisor in the biology department at FSU, and she's just as phenomenal as Jesse. So both of them, go have those conversations. Start that track right now, because it will change what you thought you wanted to do with the rest of your experience at FSU. I guarantee it.
I'm going to echo Charles a bit and also agree. Go to Jesse and go to Bonnie. Bonnie was also my biology advisor before I switched over to the life of anthropology. But Bonnie, fantastic human being. And I also really love the fossil that was in her office at the time. Maybe it's still there. But yeah, super cool.
Well, it's made its way to ONF. So it's still, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so I love seeing it. So I think for me, after my experience with Gilman, I thought, okay, I feel like, okay, I've done a few months in Vietnam, I think I can consider applying for the US Peace Corps. And a little bit of background on that, I wanted to do the Peace Corps since I was a senior in high school, but I didn't know for sure whether or not I would be capable of doing a whole 27 months of service in a completely different part of the world. And I think after doing 4 months in Vietnam, which would be a little bit less than like the pre-service training portion of the Peace Corps, I thought, I really love this experience. Yes, there are difficulties, but Vietnam's a beautiful country, and I learned a lot about myself, a lot about community, a lot about what it means to be a part of something bigger than myself. And I think that was something that really solidified my desires to apply. So I applied to the US Peace Corps and got invited to serve at Peace Corps Mongolia, which was leaving May 2020. Graduating May 2020, I was like, perfect. And COVID happened. So within that process, I still wanted to do service, but I decided to stay stateside and apply for AmeriCorps. And AmeriCorps is a national service program, which has so many different levels and layers, but it's basically you working with anything from a nonprofit in health to working with wildlife animals in a zoo. Yes, there's a AmeriCorps member that works in a zoo. I don't know what they do, but it's super cool. And it's just basically a way of expanding your network, expanding your view of community, and also kind of giving back in a way that's a little different than, let's say, the US Army. Like, there is so much that you can do here in the States with a kind of community lens, a public health lens. In my first AmeriCorps year, which is kind of what brought me up here to New Hampshire, I was a COVID-19 recovery AmeriCorps member, and I learned a lot about COVID, a lot about just virology and how viruses spread, and it made me more interested in kind of pursuing something in the more public health field. So Charles, I might be pinging you about that, and just kind of applying that more to a global lens. And then over this past year, I actually did apply to Fulbright, similarly to what Charles applied to a few years ago. And I applied for an English teaching assistantship since I really enjoyed teaching English in my time in Vietnam and still wanted to pursue that in some capacity. And currently I am a semifinalist for Uzbekistan there in Central Asia, but I don't know if I will move forward to finalist. If I'm still semifinalist, that's still fantastic. I think the application, similarly to what Charles said, really helped me solidify my writing and like really hone in on my storytelling and what I want to share with a pool of people. And I think also during that time, it also really helped me apply for other things I was also applying for. So I'm also a semifinalist for 2 other fellowships, one for Princeton Asia and then one for volunteers in Asia. There's also Princeton Africa and Princeton Latin America. So there are like multiple different breadths and scopes of these fellowships. But I think having that initial Gilman experience really helped me, along with the current connection now as a Gilman alumni ambassador. So I think Gilman really shaped and transformed who I am. And I think it really provided a lot that, looking back now, I don't think could have been replicated with another program. Also, congratulations, Nina, on just everything you're doing. That's so cool.
Thank you. Same to you guys. Thanks, Gilman.
Yeah, Charles, while I have you here, I don't think I've ever told you, but when I was still a graduate assistant, when we were working together, your application was really one of the reasons why I decided to stay in the field. I was just like my boy, but that was my first cohort of students that I got to work with on applications entirely by myself. And so, yeah, when you texted me, I want to apply to Fulbright, I still remember the training that I was in that I was completely ignoring because it was just like, all right, let's get started. So I still have a slight grudge to the University of Sheffield. Wonderful institution, I'm sure, but they will always be dead to me. But I know we ran a little bit over on time, but I just want to thank all of you so much for sharing not just your time, but your experiences and reflecting on this opportunity and how it just impacted you personally and professionally. And so I know a couple of you dropped your email, and so feel free to reach out to these wonderful individuals if you have more specific questions, or if you're interested perhaps in the countries that they traveled to, or feel free to reach out to myself and Bonnie if you would like to schedule a meeting. Like I said, we still have 3 weeks until the deadline, but even if you're thinking of applying next year, or if there are other opportunities you might be interested in, we would love to talk to you. So thank you so much for joining. I know I've held you all here for a very long time, so feel free to head out, and we'll get this recording up on our YouTube channel, and we'll send it out to everyone who registered for this meeting too. But thank you all so much.